Right, we will now move on to our third presentation, and I will invite Violet back to speak with Nora Fernandes about the work she does with culturally and linguistically diverse communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. So there we go, Nora. So Nora is our Community Engagement and Capacity Building Manager. And Nora Fernandes came to Palliative Care Victoria with many years' experience in community development in Asia and the Pacific, living in the Philippines, Cambodia and Thailand. How wonderful. And many years after arriving in Melbourne, Nora retrained in trauma counselling and worked with migrant and refugee sectors before moving into mainstream community health services. So an absolute wealth of experience for Palliative Care Victoria to benefit from. So Nora, would you like to tell us what's been the most exciting outcome in your cold palliative care programme this year? You're on mute.
Yes, sure. I'd like to talk about 4 developments that have happened in the last year. The first one is that there's been a growing number of multicultural and ethnic organizations promoting palliative care, providing psychosocial palliative support. It's also, the shift actually started thanks to DHS when they funded 7 ethnic and multicultural organizations to provide community-based palliative support. Palliative Care Victoria has also supported 3 of the smaller organizations, and that is the St. Michael's Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the Serbian Community Association of Australia, and United Spanish Latin American Welfare Center. Things have sort of, there's been a spin-off since then, and there are resources that we are identifying in the community which we didn't know before. For example, the Spanish Latin American group were able to train their volunteers in palliative support, and then they also identified a psychologist who specializes in grief and trauma, and they she gave them a training session in Spanish. Similarly, the St. Michael's Ethiopian Orthodox Church, in talking about palliative care in their community, identified a palliative care nurse who's got about 13 years experience, and they were able to get her to run a session, to agree to talking to the community about palliative care. So it's like the conversations have begun. Then the Southern Migrant and Refugee Center has set up a network of community-based multicultural and ethnic palliative care organizations, council representatives, and 2 of the specialist palliative support, palliative services. And they're sharing information and supporting each other in the work they do. 2 of the specialist palliative care services, the Palliative Care Southeast and Monash Palliative Care Unit, have begun a dialogue with several ethnic community organizations to share resources in training volunteers and also referrals. There's also been an increase in the number of people in the ethnic aged care sector who are interested in talking about palliative care, and also for their staff to learn and to feel more comfortable about these conversations. Now, 2 years ago, that wasn't happening. So I guess for me, that's been a real shift, and it's really exciting to see.
That's amazing, because you've certainly taken me on a whistle-stop tour of a lot of these communities, and I can't believe that's over a 2-year span. So what do you think's accounting for this successful engagement of so many faith and cultural groups from PCV for the COLD programme, Nora?
Well, I think it's the approach we use, and I think palliative care has an influence on that approach. So when we're in receiving palliative care, we understand that the patient also has the right to say and do what they would like from the service. And so it's the same way that we work with our communities, with the COLD communities. They have a right to tell us what they like, and we encourage them to shape any resources and to have a say in the support they want, and in kind of interaction and partnership. So it's also about partnership, and it's also about respecting what the community would like, and giving them some of the control of those conversations and of the activities. For example, several months ago, earlier this year, we were talking to some of the community members, and one of the community members said, "Tell us just briefly, how palliative care can help us?" And we thought, "Oh, that's a fair question. Now, how do we put that into just brief, just a few points?" So when we returned to the office, we decided, why not put together a list of one page on the kind of services that palliative care can provide a community, can benefit people, and have that translated into the local ethnic languages. So we put together a document of about 10 points of describing the several services that can be provided, and we checked that in with the 7 specialist services in metro and in rural Victoria. And then we took it to the community and we said, look, this is what palliative care can do for you, but they are arranged in the way that we prioritize it. And some of these might be important to you, some might not be. So we'd like you to take this and rearrange it and translate it, and then let us know how you feel about it, whether it's how you want us to present it. So we also asked them to talk to about 10 to 12 persons in their community and consult with them, and preferably with people who are older, with younger men and women, people from the health professionals, non-health professionals, people from colleagues or patients or carers. And then they came back to us. So within 2 days, we had signed up about 20 language groups to do this work. And then the 21st, one more group came to us and said, we'd like one for our community too. So we said, okay, 21. And we asked them to work on it. It was just at the lockdown time, so it sort of came in the middle of our plans. But in the process of discussing it with their community groups, and some went on to talk to many groups in their community, there were about 300 people from the different communities involved in those discussions. And so before we even went to print, many of the people had already engaged with the services that were being provided, with the content of the fact sheet. So we've actually got those fact sheets on our website, 21 languages. And I understand that Palliative Care Australia is using a similar process in Northern Territories to translate it into Indigenous languages. So I guess one of the things we learned there is that when we respect that the community can be an active member or active player in producing resources, then we are also validating the partnership. It's not just a passive recipient of information.
Yeah, thank you, Nora. That's a fantastic example of the respectful engagement that I've seen in my short time in Palliative Care Victoria. So it's great that you shared that. So, you know, as you've already worked out, I have rose-coloured glasses on all the time. So what I'd like to know is that in your ideal world, what would be in place to ensure that we have a multiculturally safe palliative care provision in Victoria?
Well, this is something I dream about too. And I think that when the health professionals who go out to the home, the palliative care health professionals, when they go out to the homes of people who are in require their services, when they reflect the cultural diversity, cultural and gender diversity of the community in which they are working or in which they represent, then I think we'll have multiculturally safe palliative care.
That's a great dream to have. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and experience with us during this session, Nora.